When dawn had risen from the bed where she sleeps with noble Tithonus, to bring daylight to the immortals and to men, Zeus sent down cruel strife to the Greek ships with the emblem of battle in her hands. She took her stand on the bulging black hull of Odysseus's ship. This stood in the centre of the line, so that a shout would carry to either end, to the huts of Ajax son of Telamon, or those of Achilles. Both these had had confidence enough in their own bravery and strength to draw up their ships on the extreme flanks. They have said this bit before. Standing there, the goddess uttered her great and terrible war cry, filling the heart of every Greek with mighty courage to do battle and fight the enemy relentlessly. At once the prospect of battle became sweeter to them than returning in their hollow ships to the land of their fathers. Agamemnon shouted orders to his troops to prepare for battle, and himself put on his gleaming bronze armour. First he placed fine leg guards on his shins, fitted with silver ankle clips. Then he put on body armour that Cinyras had once presented to him as a gift of friendship. News had reached Cinyras in Cyprus of the great Greek expedition that was about to sail for Troy, and he had sent this body armour to gratify its leader. It was made of strips, 10 of dark blue inlay, 12 of gold, and 20 of tin. On either side, 3 dark blue snakes rose up towards the opening for the neck, looking like the rainbow that Zeus fixes on a cloud as a portent to mankind below. Next, Agamemnon slung his sword over his shoulder. Gold rivets glittered on the hilt, but the sheath was of silver, with gold rings for attaching to its shoulder strap. Then he took up his lively, man-covering shield, a superbly decorated piece, with its 10 concentric rings of bronze and 20 white studs of tin circling a dark inlaid boss in the middle. A horrible Gorgon's head with fearsome eyes was set like a wreath round the centre, and on either side of that, panic and rout were depicted. It was fitted with a silver decorated shoulder strap, round, with a writhing snake of blue inlay twisted in either directions, the 3 heads that grew from its single neck. On his head, Agamemnon placed a helmet with metal plates on either side, 4 ridges and horsehair crest. The plume nodded frighteningly from the top. Finally, he picked up a pair of strong, sharp, bronze-headed spears. Beams from the bronze armour he wore flashed into the distant sky, and Athene and Hera thundered in answer, glorifying Agamemnon, lord of golden Mycenae. The warriors each left their chariots in their driver's charge, with instructions to draw them up in proper order on the outer side of the ditch, while they themselves hurried forward across the ditch in their full equipment. The tumult of battle filled the air that early morning. They formed their line along the ditch some time before their drivers, though these were only a little way behind them. But Zeus, son of Cronus, fanned dire confusion among them, and from the upper air released showers of blood, since he intended to send many mighty souls to Hades. On their side, too, the Trojans lined up on the high ground of the plain, round great Hector, matchless Polydamas, Aeneas, whom the Trojan people honoured like a god, and Antenor's 3 sons, Polybus, godlike Agenor, and young Acamas, looking like the immortals. Hector was in the front ranks carrying his circular shield, like a menacing star that at one point can be seen shining out from behind the clouds, and the next moment sinks behind them into shadow. So Hector was seen, now in the front ranks, now in the rear, spurring them on. His bronze armour flashed like the lightning that comes from Father Zeus, who who drives the storm clouds. And now, like reapers who, starting from opposite sides of a rich man's field, drive swaths through his wheat or barley, and the handfuls of cut ears keep on falling, so the Trojans and Greeks leapt at each other and started the killing. Neither side contemplated fatal flight. The confrontation brought them head to head, and they charged in like wolves. Strife, who deals in sorrow, rejoiced when she saw them. She was the only one of the gods to witness this action. The rest were not on the battlefield, but sitting at home uninvolved, each in his lovely house built on the folds of Olympus. They were all at loggerheads with Zeus, who darkens the clouds, because he wished to give the Trojans the victory. But Father Zeus cared nothing for the gods. He had slipped away from them and sat down on his own a long way off, exulting in his glory, and looking down on the Trojan town and the Greek ships, on the flashing bronze, the killers and the killed. Right through the morning, while the blessed light of day grew stronger, volley and counter-volley found their mark, and men kept falling. But about the time that a woodman prepares a mid-morning meal in a mountain dell, and, his arms weary from felling the tall trees, feels he has done enough and yields to the thought of delicious food, at that time the Greeks, calling to their companions across the ranks, summoned up their courage and broke the enemy lines. Agamemnon was first to charge in and killed the Trojan Biennon, shepherd of the people, and after him his comrade and charioteer Oileus. Oileus had leapt down from his chariot to oppose him, but as he moved in to the attack, Agamemnon stabbed him in the forehead with his sharp spear. Ouch! The heavy bronze helmet failed to stop the spear, and it pierced both the metal and the bone, and spattered all the inside of the helmet with his brains. So he ended Oileus's assault. This is cruel having a lisp, honestly. Agamemnon, after stripping off their tunics, left the dead men there, chests gleaming, and went on to kill Isus and Antiphus, two sons of Priam, one a bastard and the other legitimate, both in the one chariot. The bastard Isus was driving it. Excellent Antiphus was beside him. This pair had been caught before by Achilles as they shepherded their flocks on the spurs of Ida. He had tied them up with willow shoots, but afterwards accepted ransom and released them. And now they met wide-ruling Agamemnon. He hit Isus with his spear above the nipple, always the nipple, on his chest. He struck Antiphus beside the ear with his sword and hurled him out of the chariot. Then, with all speed, he stripped the splendid armour from the pair, recognizing them as he did so. He had seen them before by his own swift ships, when swift-footed Achilles had brought them in from Mount Ida. As a lion easily crunches up the little fawns of a speedy doe, breaking into her lair and seizing them in its powerful jaws, and robbing them of their tender life. Even if the doe is close at hand, she cannot help them. She is terrified herself, and off she flies, crashing through the forest undergrowth, and sweating in her haste to save herself from the powerful beast's attack. So the Trojans could not save these two from destruction, but were themselves in flight from the Greeks. Agamemnon next attacked Peisander and resolute Hippolochus. That's how you say it, not Hippolochus, which I kept saying. Okay. Peisander and resolute Hippolochus, sons of warlike Antimachus. He, hoping for splendid bribes of gold from Paris, had dissuaded the Trojans from returning Helen to Menelaus. Well, that was stupid. But now it was his two sons, that were captured by Lord Agamemnon. They were in one chariot and they were trying to control their swift horses. But the horses were in confusion, since the gleaming reins had slipped from the charioteer's hands. Agamemnon sprang at them like a lion, and without even dismounting, they appealed to him. "Son of Atreus, take us alive, and you will get a ransom that will be well worth it. Antimachus, our father, is rich. He has plenty of treasure in his house, bronze and gold and wrought iron. He would offer you an immense ransom if he heard we had been taken back to the Greek ships alive." So, tearfully, they addressed Agamemnon with pitiful words. But there was no pity in the voice that answered them. "If you too are sons of warlike Antimachus, he is the man who once argued in the Trojan assembly that Menelaus, who had come there on an embassy with godlike Odysseus, should be killed on the spot and not allowed to return to Greece. You shall now pay for your father's disgraceful insult." He spoke, and hitting Peisander in the chest with his spear, knocked him out of the chariot and pushed him to the ground, flat on his back. Hippolochus leapt down from the chariot, but Agamemnon killed him on the ground. He slashed off his arms and head with his sword and sent the trunk rolling like a log through the crowd. Well, that was a bit much. Agamemnon now left the two there and charged in where the fighting was at its most confused, backed by the rest of the Greek men-at-arms. Foot soldiers and charioteers forced their opposite numbers to run and slaughtered them with their spears, while from the ground the dust rose, kicked up by the horses' thundering hooves. And all the while Lord Agamemnon, shouting to the Greeks, followed up and killed. As a raging fire attacks a thickly wooded forest, a billowing wind blows the flames back and forth, and uprooted bushes fall headlong before the fire's onslaught, so the routed Trojans were mown down by Agamemnon's onslaught. Many a pair of horses tossed their heads and rattled their empty chariots down the lines of battle, missing their charioteers who lay sprawled on the ground, far more enticing to the vultures than to their wives. Zeus kept Hector away from the flying missiles, the dust, the slaughter, the blood, and the mayhem, and Agamemnon continued his chase, calling out loud to the Greeks. The Trojans swept back over the middle of the plain, past the grave mound made in olden days for Ilus, son of Dardanus, and past the wild fig tree, making for the town. Yelling, Agamemnon stayed in hot pursuit. Spattering his invincible hands with gore. I don't think he's invincible, though. But when the Trojans reached the Scaean gate and the oak tree, they came to a halt and waited there for the others. These were still flying in panic over the open plain, like cattle when a lion stampedes a herd at dusk, and sudden death comes to a solitary heifer. It seizes her, breaks her neck with its powerful jaws, and then devours her blood and entrails. So Lord Agamemnon pursued them, always killing the hindmost, and they fled in panic. Many a charioteer was toppled out of his chariot by him, face first or on his back. Such was his raging onslaught with the spear. He had almost reached the town and its steep walls when the father of men and gods descended from the skies to take up position on the heights of Mount Ida with its many springs. He had a thunderbolt in his hand and sent off golden-winged Iris with a message. "Off with you, swift Iris, and give Hector this message from me. As long as he sees Agamemnon, shepherd of the people, storming along the front line and mowing down the Trojan ranks, let him give ground. But tell his men to continue battling it out in the thick of the action with the enemy. But directly Agamemnon is hit by a spear or arrow and takes to his chariot, then I will give Hector strength to kill until he reaches the well-benched ships. The sun sets, and blessed darkness intervenes." So he spoke, and swift Iris, quick as the wind, complied. She sped down from the peaks of Mount Ida to sacred Ilium. There she found godlike Hector, son of wise Priam, standing in his finely built chariot with its horses. Swift-footed Iris went up to him and said, "Hector, son of Priam, equal in wisdom to Zeus, Father Zeus has sent me down to deliver his word to you. As long as you see Agamemnon, shepherd of the people, storming along the front line and mowing down the Trojan ranks, give ground, but tell your men to continue battling it out in the thick of the action with the enemy. But directly Agamemnon is hit by a spear or arrow and takes to his chariot, then he will give you strength to kill until you reach the well-bent ships, the sun sets, and blessed darkness intervenes." With these words, swift-footed Iris withdrew. Fully armed, Hector immediately leapt from his chariot to the ground, and brandishing a pair of sharp spears, went everywhere among his men, urging them to fight and rousing their spirit for grim battle. As a result, the Trojans turned and faced the Greeks. But the Greeks, on their side, reinforced their ranks. Thus the battle was set. The two armies faced each other, and Agamemnon, eager to lead the fighting from the front, was the first to leap on the enemy. Tell me now, you muses, that have your home on Olympus, who was the first of the Trojans or their famous allies to face Agamemnon? It was Iphidamas, son of Trojan Antenor, tall and handsome, who had been brought up in the fertile country of Thrace, mother of sheep. His grandfather, Cesis, his grandfather, Cesis, father of his mother, fair-cheeked Theano, had raised him from infancy in his own palace, and when Iphidamas reached the stage of youthful ambition, had done his best to keep him at home by offering him his daughter's hand. But Iphidamas had no sooner married her than he left the bridal chamber in pursuit of glory against the Greeks. He sailed with 12 beaked ships, left them in harbour at Percote, and himself reached Ilium on foot. This was the man who now confronted Agamemnon, son of Atreus. When they had come within range of each other, Agamemnon missed with his spear, and it flew wide. Iphidamas stabbed Agamemnon on the belt under his body armour, and threw the whole weight of his body into it, keeping a firm grip on the spear. But he failed to pierce the glittering belt. When his spear point met the silver, it bent like a bit of lead. Wide-ruling Agamemnon got his hand on the shaft and, pulling it towards him with the fury of a lion, dragged it out of the man's grasp. Then with his sword he hit him on the neck and brought him down. So there Iphidamas fell, to sleep the unbreakable sleep, a pitiable end, helping his fellow Trojans, far from his wife, the new bride from whom he had had no joy, though he had given so much for her. He had already handed over 100 head of cattle and promised 1,000 more sheep and goats from his countless flocks. And now Agamemnon, son of Atreus, stripped his body and went off with his splendid armour into the Greek ranks. When admirable Coon, Antenor's eldest son, realized what had happened, grief for his fallen brother blinded him, and he came up side on, unnoticed by godlike Agamemnon, and struck him below the elbow in the middle of the forearm. The glittering spear point went right on through. Agamemnon, lord of men, convulsed, but far from giving up the fight and withdrawing, he charged at Coon, brandishing his weathered spear. Coon had got hold of Iphidamas's foot and was hurriedly dragging his brother into the crowd, calling on all the best men to help. As he did so, Agamemnon stabbed him with his bronze spear under his bossed shield and brought him down. Then he went up to him and cut his head off over the body of Iphidamas. So at the hands of Lord Agamemnon, these sons of Antenor fulfilled their destiny and went down to the house of Hades. As long as the warm blood was still welling up from his injury, Agamemnon continued to harry the enemy ranks with spear, sword, and boulders. But when the blood stopped flowing and the wound began to dry, he felt stabbing pains. As sharp pangs seized a woman in childbirth, the bitter pangs that are sent by the, oh my God, I cannot pronounce that word, Aletheia. Okay. The bitter pangs that are sent by the goddesses of labour, who are daughters of Hera and dispense its bitter pains, such were the stabbing pains Agamemnon felt. He leapt into his chariot, told his charioteer to drive to the hollow ships, and in considerable distress sent his voice ringing out to the whole Greek army. Well, that was a mistake. Friends, rulers, and leaders of the Greeks, keep the furious battle away from our seafaring ships, since Zeus, wise in counsel, has not allowed me to fight the Trojans all day long. So he spoke, and his charioteer whipped his lovely maned horses towards the hollow ships. The willing pair flew off, and their chests were flecked with foam, their bellies grey with dust, as they carried off their wounded lord far from the battlefield. When Hector saw Agamemnon withdraw, he called out to the Trojans and Lycians in a loud voice, "Trojans, Lycians, and you Dardanians, that like your fighting hand to hand, be men, my comrades, and call up that fighting spirit of yours. Their best man is gone, and Zeus, son of Cronus, has given me a great victory. Drive your horses straight at these mighty Greeks, and win a greater victory yet." With these words he put fresh heart and courage into every man. As a hunter sets his white-fanged hounds on a savage wild boar or a lion, so Hector, son of Priam, equal of the murderous war god Ares, set the proud Trojans on the Greeks. Fearlessly he took his own place in the forefront and flung himself into the battle, like a squall that weeps down from the like a squall that sweeps down from the mountains and lashes the blue waters of the sea. And who were the first and last that fell to Hector, son of Priam, now that Zeus had given him the victory? Asius first, and Autonomus, and Optes, Dolops, son of Clytius, Opheltius, and Agelaus, Aesymnus, Orus, and resolute Hipponuus. These were the first Greek leaders he killed. Then he fell on the ranks. As a storm-force northwest wind batters and scatters the clouds, blown up by a clear southwesterly, the great rollers start their forward march, and the foam flies high on the roaring blasts of the swirling wind. So the enemy fell in multitudes before the onslaught of Hector. Irreparable disaster now threatened the Greeks, who in their flight would soon have reached the ships and fallen there, had not Odysseus called out to Diomedes, son of Tydeus, "Son of Tydeus, what's the matter with us? Where's that fighting spirit of ours gone? Here, my old friend, make a stand with me. We will never live it down if Hector of the flashing helmet captures the ships." Mighty Diomedes replied to him and said, "Of course I'll stand with you, and take what comes. But it won't help us for very long. Zeus, who marshals the clouds, has decided he'd rather see the Trojans win than us." He spoke, flung his spear at Thymbraeus, hit him on the left nipple again, and knocked him out of his chariot, while Odysseus dealt with Molion, his godlike attendant, leaving these two where they fell, and for them there was no more fighting. The pair dashed into the crowd, and ran riot, as a couple of wild boars turned fearlessly and charged the hounds that are chasing them. So they rounded on the Trojans and destroyed them, giving the Greeks a welcome pause for breath in their flight from godlike Hector. A chariot and 2 leaders of the people then fell to them. They were the 2 sons of Merops of Percote, the ablest prophet of his day. He had forbidden his sons to go off to the killing fields, but these 2, led on by the demons of death, had not listened to him. And now the great spearman Diomedes took their life and stripped them of their glorious arms, while Odysseus killed and stripped Hippodamus and Hypereocus. Then Zeus, looking down from Mount Ida, intensified the battle on both sides, and for a time the slaughter became mutual. Diomedes stabbed Agastrophus, the warrior son of Paeon, on the hip joint with his spear. This man had been unable to escape, as his chariot was nowhere near, utterly deluded. Agastrophus had left his charioteer holding the horses some way off, while he had charged into the front line on foot. This cost him his life. But Hector, looking sharply across the ranks, launched himself at Diomedes and Odysseus with a great shout, which brought the Trojan ranks after him. When Diomedes, master of the battle cries, saw him, he was shaken. He turned at once to Odysseus, who was close at hand, and said, "Trouble's looming. Here comes imperious Hector. Come on, let's make a stand and drive him off." He spoke, balanced his long-shadowed spear, and hurled it. He had aimed at Hector's head and did not miss, striking him on the crest of the helmet, but the bronze spear rebounded from the bronze and never reached his fine flesh. It was stopped by triple layers of visored helmet which Phoebus Apollo had given him. Hector promptly retreated without looking back and disappeared into the crowd. Sinking to his knees, he supported himself with one great hand on the ground, and then the world went black as night. Meanwhile, Diomedes was following up his spear throw across the front lines to the spot where it had fallen. So Hector had time to come to, leap once more into his chariot, and drive off into the crowd. He had escaped dark death, but mighty Diomedes, rushing up with his spear, said, "You dog! Once more, you've saved your skin, but only just. Phoebus Apollo took care of you again. You must pray to him as the spears thud around you. But we shall meet once more, and then I'll finish you off, if I too can find some god somewhere to help me. For the moment I'll attack anyone else I can find." He spoke and proceeded to strip his earlier victim, Agastrophus. Now Paris, husband of lovely-haired Helen, aimed his bow at Diomedes, shepherd of the people, leaning for cover against the column on the grave mound which men had made for an earlier Trojan leader, Ilus, son of Dardanus. As Diomedes was engaged in removing the ornate body armour from mighty Agastrophus's chest, the shield from his shoulder, and his heavy helmet from his head, Paris drew the bow and shot. The arrow did not leave his hand for nothing. Hitting Diomedes on the flat of his right foot, it went right through and stuck in the earth. Paris, with a happy laugh, leapt out from his cover and spoke in triumph over Diomedes. "Got you! I didn't shoot for nothing. I only wish I'd hit you in the belly and killed you. Then the Trojans, who tremble at you like bleating goats at a lion, would have had some respite from their trouble." Unperturbed, mighty Diomedes answered him. Typical archer, loud mouth, all hairstyle and bedroom eyes. If you faced me man to man with real weapons, you would find your bow and arrows a poor defence. As it is, you're boasting about scratching my foot. I might as well have been hit by a woman rude, or a naughty little boy, for all I care. A shot from a cowardly non-entity never hurt anyone, but my weapons show their edge rather differently. One touch from them, and a man is dead. His wife lacerates her cheeks, and his children have no father. The earth turns red with his blood, and there he rots, with more vultures than girls clustering around him. So he spoke, and the great spearman Odysseus came up and covered him. Diomedes sat down under his protection and drew the sharp arrow from his foot. Pain stabbed through him, and in considerable distress he got into his chariot and told his charioteer to drive back to the hollow ships. Left to himself without a single Greek to support him, since they were all in flight, the great spearman Odysseus was perturbed and reflected on the situation. Well, damn, what am I to do now? It would be pure cowardice to run for it, frightened by the odds against me, but even more unpleasant to be trapped alone now that Zeus has put all the rest of the Greeks to flight. But why talk to myself like this? I know cowards run from the battlefield, but the brave warrior must stand unflinching to kill or be killed. While these thoughts raced through Odysseus' mind, shield-bearing Trojan ranks bore down and surrounded him. They brought themselves nothing but trouble. As strong young huntsmen and their hounds harry a wild boar which emerges from the depth of its lair, sharpening up its white tusks in its crooked jaws, they rush at it from every side. There is a noise of gnashing teeth, but formidable as the boar is, they hold their ground against it. So the encircling Trojans harried Odysseus, dear to Zeus. First Odysseus leapt at matchless Diopetes with his sharp spear and stabbed down on his shoulder from above. Next he killed Thoon and Enomas. Chersidamas then jumped down from his chariot, but Odysseus stabbed him with his spear in the crutch? Where's the crutch? If it was crotch, I'd know where that was, but crutch? But Odysseus stabbed him with his spear in the crutch under his bossed shield. He fell in the dust and clutched at the earth. Leaving them where they fell, Odysseus with his spear stabbed Charops, son of Hippasus. He was a brother of wealthy Socus, a godlike mortal who, advancing to defend him, took his stand in front of Odysseus and said, "Celebrated Odysseus, with your relish for contricts and combat, today you will either triumph over both sons of Hippasus and boast about the splendid pair you have killed and stripped, or be brought down by my spear and die yourself." With these words he stabbed at Odysseus's round shield. The heavy weapon pierced the glittering shield, forced its way through the ornate body armour, and ripped the flesh clean off Odysseus's side, though Pallas Athene did not allow it to penetrate his innards. Odysseus knew it had not touched a vital spot, drew back and said to Socus, "Miserable wretch, your doom is sealed. You have stopped me fighting the Trojans, but I tell you, dark death and destruction await you this day. Conquered by my spear, you will surrender the glory to me and your life to the god Hades, famed for his horses." He spoke, and Socus turned and started to run. As he turned, Odysseus stabbed him with his spear in the middle of the back between his shoulders and drove it through his chest. He thudded to the ground, and godlike Odysseus triumphed over him. "Ah, Socus, son of Hippasus, the brave charioteer. So death, after all, was too quick for you, and you did not escape. Your eyes, poor wretch, will not be closed in death by your father and your lady mother, but the carrion birds will gather round you with their flapping wings and tear your body to pieces. But when I die, I shall have funeral honours from the godlike Greeks." With these words he pulled Socus's heavy spear out of his own wound and bossed shield. Blood gushed up as the point came out, and Odysseus was in serious distress. When the Trojans saw blood, they called to each other across the ranks and attacked him in a body. Odysseus gave ground, shouting to his friends for help. He called 3 times at the top of his voice, and warlike Menelaus, hearing his cries, turned quickly to Ajax, who happened to be near, and said, "Olympian-born Ajax, son of Telamon, leader of men, I can hear great Odysseus crying out. It sounds as though the Trojans have cut him off in the thick of the action and overpowered him. You and I had better charge in to the rescue. I am afraid it will be all up with him if we leave him stranded like that, great warrior though he is. What a loss to the Greeks that would be." With these words, he led the way, and godlike Ajax went with him. They soon found Odysseus, Trojans crowding round him like tawny jackals. In the mountains round an antlered stag, wounded by an arrow from a huntsman's bow. It has the speed to leave the man behind, as long as the blood flows warm and its legs carry it. But when the arrow has sapped its strength, the flesh-eating jackals devour it in the shadowy woods of the mountain. A god then brings a predatory lion on the scene. The jackals scatter. It is the lion's turn to feed. Just so, many brave Trojans crowded round warlike, quick-thinking Odysseus, who, by lunging out with his spear, managed to keep death at bay. But now Ajax, with his tower-like shield, came up and covered him. The Trojans scattered in all directions, and warlike Menelaus took Odysseus by the arm and led him through the crowd, while an attendant brought up Menelaus' chariot. Ajax then flung himself on the Trojans and killed Doricles, a bastard son of Priam's. Next he stabbed Pandocus, and Lysander, and Pyrrhasus, and Pylates. As a river in the spate, swollen by the winter rains, rushes down from the mountains to the plain, sweeping up dead oaks and pines and carrying piles of driftwood to the sea, so glorious Ajax stormed across the plain and fell on the enemy, destroying horse and man. Hector knew nothing of all this. He was engaged on the far left by the banks of the river Scamander, where the slaughter was heaviest and the tumult of battle filled the air round great Nestor and warlike Idomeneus. Hector was in the thick of it here, creating havoc with chariot and spear and mowing down the Greek youth. Yet even so, the godlike Greeks would not have given ground to him if Paris, husband of lovely-haired Helen, had not halted Machaon, shepherd of the people and the best warrior there, by hitting him with a 3-barbed arrow in the right shoulder. The Greeks, breathing courage, were terrified he might be captured as the battle swayed, and Idomeneus at once spoke to godlike Nestor. "Quick, Nestor, son of Neleus, great glory of the Greeks, into your chariot, pick up Machaon, and drive with all speed to the ships. A healer like him, who can cut out arrows and apply soothing herbs, is worth 1,000 others." So he spoke, and Nestor, the Gerenian charioteer, complied. He mounted his chariot, and Machaon, son of Asclepius, the matchless healer, got in beside him. Nestor lashed the horses with the whip, and the willing pair flew off towards the hollow ships, eager to reach their journey's end. Cebriones, Hector's charioteer, saw that the Trojans elsewhere had been put to flight and spoke his mind to Hector. "Hector, here are we engaged with the Greeks on the very fringe of the battle, while the rest of the Trojans are running off in chaos, chariots and all. Ajax, son of Telamon, is sweeping them before him. I recognize him easily. He has that broad shield on his shoulders. Let's drive over there and join in where the charioteers and infantry are launching their strongest assault, where men are killing each other and the tumult of battle fills the air." With these words, Cebriones whipped his lovely maned horses with his whistling lash. Hearing the stroke, they swept the chariot off at a gallop towards the Trojans and Greeks, trampling dead men and shields alike. The whole axle of the chariot and the rails that ran round it was sprayed with blood, thrown up by the horses' hooves and the wheel rims. Hector was eager to get in among the throng of fighting men, to charge and break through, but though his arrival brought terrible confusion to the Greeks, he did not shrink from using his spear. He avoided battle with Ajax son of Telamon, and made his presence felt among the rest of the enemy, with spear and sword and boulder. Father Zeus on his high throne then made Ajax retreat. He lost his nerve and came to a halt. Then, looking anxiously about him, he swung his sevenfold shield across his back, turned in retreat, and step by step gave ground like a wild beast, with many a backward look. As dogs and farmhands drive a tawny lion from a cattle yard, they have stayed awake all night to protect the choicest of their cattle from its jaws, but, hungry for meat, the lion keeps on charging, but it does no good by it. Showers of spears and blazing torches hurled at it by strong hands scare it off for all its appetite. And at dawn it slinks off, disappointed. So, equally disappointed, Ajax retreated from the Trojans, much against his will and acutely conscious of the danger to the Greek ships. As a stubborn donkey passing a cornfield defies the boys in charge of him, though stick after stick has often been broken round its ribs, and goes in and helps himself to the rich standing crop, the children continue to beat him, but their efforts are feeble, and they just about manage to drive him out, but not before he has eaten all he wants. So the proud Trojans and their famous allies dogged the steps of great Ajax son of Telamon, stabbing at the centre of his shield with their spears. At times Ajax would call up that fighting spirit of his, wheel and hold the ranks of the horse-taming Trojans at bay, and then once more he would turn and resume his retreat. In this way he managed to fend off the whole force that was threatening the ships, standing and laying about him halfway between the Trojans and the Greeks. Many spears launched from strong arms were halted in their forward flight by his great shield, while many others fell short before they could enjoy white flesh, and stuck in the earth, thirsting to take their fill. When splendid Eurypylus noticed Ajax labouring under this hail of missiles, he ran up to support him, let fly his glittering spear, and struck Apisaon. I'm a 12-year-old boy. There's got to be a different way of saying that. And struck Apisaon. Apisaon. We'll go with that, shall we? Let fly his glittering spear and struck Apisaon, shepherd of the people, in the liver under the midriff, bringing him down at once. Then, charging up, he began to take the armour from his shoulders. But as Eurypylus stripped his man, godlike Paris saw him, quickly bent his bow at him, and hit him with an arrow in the right thigh. The shaft broke off in his thigh and slowed him down, but he retreated into his own contingent of warriors to avoid death. He then sent his voice ringing out to the whole Greek army. "My friends, rulers and leaders of the Greeks, turn, make a stand and save Ajax from destruction. He's under a hail of missiles, and I cannot see how he can disengage himself. Rally round great Ajax son of Telamon." So spoke the wounded Eurypylus, and they closed and rallied round Ajax, crouching behind sloped shields with their spears up at the ready. Ajax came to meet them, and when he reached his own contingent, turned about and stood his ground. So they fought on like blazing fire. Meanwhile, the mares of Neleus's breed, sweating as they ran, were carrying Nestor from the battlefield, and with him Machaon, shepherd of the people. Swift-footed godlike Achilles, who had been watching the uphill work of battle and the Greeks' unhappy retreat from the stern of his wide-bellied ship, saw him and took note. He called at once to his companion, Patroclus, shouting for him from the ship. Hearing the call in his hut, Patroclus, equal of Ares, came out, and that was the beginning of his end. The strong son of Menoetius spoke first. "Why did you call, Achilles? What do you want me for?" Swift-footed Achilles replied and said, "That would be my dog asking for water. Godlike son of Menoetius, my pride and joy. Now I think the Greeks will be gathering at my knees in supplication. They are in desperate straits. But go now, Patroclus, and ask Nestor who is the wounded man he is taking from the battlefield." Seen from behind, he looks exactly like Machaon, son of Asclepius, but the horses raced past in such a hurry that I could not see his face. So he spoke, and Patroclus complied with his companion and set off at a run along the Greeks' huts and their ships. When Nestor and Machaon reached Nestor's hut, they stepped down from the chariot to the bountiful earth, while Eurymedon, the old man's attendant, unyoked the horses. The men then stood in the breeze by the seashore to dry the sweat from their tunics, and after that went inside and took a seat. Lovely-haired Hacemide prepared them a drink. Nestor had won her when Achilles sacked Tenedos. She was the daughter of great-hearted Arsinius, and the Greeks had picked her out for Nestor because he was their wisest adviser. First she pushed up a handsome polished table with blue inlaid feet. On this she placed a bronze dish with an onion as seasoning for the drink, some yellow honey and barley bread, and beside these a magnificent cup adorned with gold rivets, which the old man had brought from home. It had 4 handles, and on top of each, facing one another, 2 gold doves were dipping their beaks. There were 2 supports underneath. Anyone else would have found it difficult to shift the cup from the table when it was full, but Nestor, old as he was, could lift it with ease. This woman, like the goddesses, poured Pramnian wine into the cup. Shush now. Grated into it some goat's milk cheese with a bronze grater, sprinkled white barley on top, and when she had finished, told them to drink. They had quenched their parching thirst and were agreeably engaged in conversation when Patroclus suddenly appeared in the doorway, a mortal like a god. The old man saw him, got up from his polished chair and took him by the hand, brought him in, and told him to sit down. But Patroclus, from the other side, refused, and explained, "No time for sitting down, my venerable lord. You will not persuade me. That man who sent me to find out the wounded man you just brought in, he commands respect. He is easy to annoy. But as I can see for myself that it is Machaon, shepherd of the people, I will go back at once and report to Achilles. You know well enough, Olympian-bred sir, what a difficult man he is, quite capable of finding fault without reason." "Stop!" "Really?" Nestor, the Geranian charioteer, replied, Why is Achilles so concerned about a few Greek casualties? Will you pack it in? Stop asking. You're very rude, you know." "Okay." "When he knows nothing about the disaster affecting the whole army. Our very best men are lying by the ships, hit by missiles or stabbed. Mighty Diomedes has been hit. Odysseus, the great spearman, has been stabbed. So has Agamemnon. Eurypylus has had an arrow in his thigh. And here is another I have just brought from the battlefield, hit by an arrow. Yet Achilles, great warrior that he is, feels no concern or pity for the Greeks. Is he waiting till, in spite of all we can do, our ships go up in flames beside the sea, and we in turn are destroyed? Certainly my strength is not what it was, or my limbs as supple. If only I was still as young, and with all my powers intact, as I was when we and the Eleans came to blows over some cattle raids, and I killed strong Itomonius, who lived in Elis. I was raiding— here goes another bloody story of the good old days. I was raiding his herds by way of reprisal for what their ruler, Augeas, lord of the Eleans, had done to us. And while Itimonius was defending them, I hit him with a spear and killed him, and his rustic followers scattered in panic. We drove off a vast quantity of booty from the plain, 50 herds of cattle, and as many flocks of sheep, droves of pigs, and scattered herds of goats, as well as 150 chestnut horses, all of them mares, and many with foals inside them. In the night we drove them into my father Neleus's town of Pylos, and Neleus was delighted that so much had fallen to me in my first military encounter. Very boastful. At dawn, our town criers summoned everyone who had debts owed to them by the Eleans to attend. Our leading men in Pylos held a meeting and divided up the spoils. Many of our people were owed compensation by the Eleans. Indeed, we in Pylos were seriously weakened at the time, the few of us that were left. The reason was that in previous years mighty Heracles had come and done his worst to us, and all our best men had been killed. I alone survived out of the 12 sons that matchless Neleus had had. All the rest had perished. As a result, the arrogant Elean warriors had been in the habit of humiliating us, and done us great wrong with their plundering. But after my raid, the old Lord Neleus had now got a herd of cattle and a great flock of sheep out of our spoils. He chose 300 for himself, together with their shepherds. The point was that the Eleans owed him a good deal of compensation. This was because Neleus had sent a 4-horse chariot to Elis to run in their games and compete for a tripod. But their ruler, Augeas, had kept them and sent back their charioteer, deprived of his horses, and with an insulting message. Neleus had resented the wording of this as much as Augeas's actions, so now he helped himself liberally to the booty, leaving the remainder to the people to divide in such a way that no one should go short of their proper share. So we were dealing with this business in Pylos, and sacrificing to the gods at various points in the town. But on the 3rd day, the whole of Elis, chariots and foot soldiers, bore down on us at great speed, and with them marched the 2 Moleones, who were still lads at the time and with no experience of war. Patroclus just stood there, listening to this. There is an outlying stronghold called Threoessa, perched on a steep hill overlooking the river Alpheus, on the borders of sandy Pylos. Their aim was to destroy this place, so they laid siege to it and overran the surrounding plain. But in the night Athene came speeding down from Olympus and warned us to arm for battle. She did not find us unwilling. In fact, the whole force she raised in Pylos was spoiling for a fight. But Neleus did not wish me to arm. He felt I knew too little about serious fighting and hid my horses from me. All the same, Athene so arranged the battle that even though I were on foot, I outshone even our own charioteers. There is a river called Mineaeus, which falls into the sea near Arene. Here our charioteers halted till bright dawn, while the foot soldiers came up, streaming up. From that point, a rapid march under arms brought us by noon to the sacred river Alpheus, and Patroclus is looking at a non-existing watch right now. There we made fine boundary sacrifices to Almighty Zeus, and also offered a bull to the river god, a bull to Poseidon, and an unworked heifer to grey-eyed Athene. We ate the sacrificial meal in our several contingents and settled down for the night on the banks of the stream, every man fully armed. The confident Eleans meanwhile were besieging the citadel of Threoessa, determined on its downfall, but they witnessed a tremendous feat of arms instead. No sooner had the sun shown his face above the horizon than we gave battle, with a prayer to Zeus and Athene. And when the 2 armies engaged, the first man fell to me, and I took over his horses. He was a spearman called Mullius, son-in-law of Augeas, married to his eldest daughter, auburn-haired Agamede, who knew every magic herb that grows in the wide world. As he came at me, I struck him with my bronze-headed spear, and he crashed in the dust. I leapt into his chariot and took my place in the front rank. The confident Ilians broke and ran in all directions when they saw their chariot leader, their best fighter, brought to earth. But I was after them like a black storm. I captured 50 chariots, and the 2 occupants of each were all brought down by my spear and bit the dust. In fact, I would have killed the twin Moliones too, had not their father, Poseidon, the wide-ruling earthshaker, hidden them in a thick mist and rescued them from the battlefield. Yes, Zeus gave us Pylians a great victory there. We chased them across open country, killing the men and gathering up their splendid armour, till our chariots were rolling through the corn lands of Buprasium, and we reached the Olenian rock and a place called Elysian Hill. At that point Athene turned our forces back, and there I killed and left my last man. Our charioteers withdrew from Buprasium and drove back to Pylos, all of them giving glory to Zeus among the gods and to Nestor among men. That was me, in my day. Long ago as it all was, by comparison Achilles is the only one who is going to get any advantage from his brilliance in battle, though he will shed many a remorseful tear when it is too late and the army is destroyed. My dear friend, your father, Menoetius, gave you instructions that day he sent you from Phthia to join Agamemnon. I and godlike Odysseus were in the house, and we heard everything he told you. We had come to Phthia and the welcoming palace of Achilles' father Peleus to recruit troops from the bountiful land of Achaea. There we found the warrior Menoetius and yourself and Achilles with you. Peleus, the old charioteer, was burning the fat thighs of an ox in his stable yard in honour of Zeus, who delights in thunder. He had a golden cup in his hand and was pouring a libation of sparkling wine as the sacrifice was burning, while you two were preparing the meat. At that moment Odysseus and I appeared at the gate. Achilles was amazed and sprang to his feet, took us by the hand, brought us in, told us to sit down and set beside us the food that hospitality requires. When we had satisfied our hunger and thirst, I began to speak, urging you and Achilles to join us. You were more than willing, and your fathers both started giving you advice, while the old man Peleus exhorted his son Achilles always to be the best and excel all others. Menoetius was giving you his own advice. My son, Achilles is of nobler birth than you, and he is also by far the stronger man. But you are older than he is. It is for you to give him sound advice, make suggestions, and give him a lead, which he will follow to his own advantage. Those were your old father's instructions, which you have forgotten. But even so, you could still speak to warlike Achilles to see if he will do what you say. Who knows? With some divine help, your suggestions might stir him to change his mind. A friend's advice is often most effective. But if he is privately deterred by some prophecy, some word from Zeus that his lady mother had told him, let him at least allow you to take the field with the Myrmidon contingent at your back, if perhaps you might bring salvation to the Greeks. Let him give you his own fine armour to fight in. Oh, so it's your fault. So that the Trojans take you for him and break off the battle. That would give our weary troops some breathing space. There is little enough respite in war. The Trojans have fought to the point of exhaustion, and you, being fresh, might well drive them back to the town from our ships and huts. So he spoke, and his words went straight to Patroclus's heart. He set off at a run past the lines of ships to rejoin Achilles. As he ran past the ships of godlike Odysseus, the place where they held their assemblies, conducted public business, and put up their altars to the gods, Eurypylus met him, limping back from the battle with a wound from an arrow in his thigh. Sweat was pouring from his head and shoulders, and dark blood gushed from a painful wound, though his mind was not affected. Strong Patroclus was moved to compassion at the sight and mournfully spoke winged words. Wretched rulers and leaders of the Greeks, so now it seems you were destined to glut the swift dogs of Troy with your white flesh, far from your dear ones and the lands of your fathers. But tell me, Eurypylus, is there any hope of holding awe-inspiring Hector in check? Or will the Greeks fall to his spear and be destroyed today? The wounded Eurypylus replied, Olympian-born Patroclus, there will be no salvation for the Greeks now. They will fall by their own black ships. All our former champions are lying there already, hit by Trojan missiles or stabbed, and all the time the enemy grows stronger. But at least you can take me and see me safe to my black ship. Then cut the arrow out from my thigh, wash off the blood with warm water, and spread soothing herbs on the wound, the excellent ones you learned about from Achilles, who was taught by Chiron, most honest of centaurs. As for our healers Podalirius and Machaon, I think one of them is lying wounded in camp in need of a good healer himself, while the other is still in the field, resisting the Trojans' frenzied attack. The strong son of Menoetius replied, How can we have got into this situation? What are we to do, Eurypylus? I am on my way with a message for warlike Achilles from Durranian Nestor, guardian of the Greeks, but I'm not going to abandon you in your distress. He spoke, put his arm around his waist, and supported the shepherd of the people back to his hut. When Eurypylus' attendant saw him, he spread some hides on the floor, and there Patroclus laid him down, cut the sharp point of the arrow out of his thigh with a knife, and washed away the dark blood from the wound with warm water. Then he crushed the root of a bitter herb with his hands and applied it. It was a painkiller, which promptly did its work. The wound began to dry, and the blood stopped flowing.